Hello and welcome to Defining Social Filmmaking, a panel all about the convergence of cinematic storytelling and social media. The entire world's in film school right now. Most people don't even know that. So we're going to talk about how we got here and where we're going with a panel of luminaries. We have Jeff Annison from Legion M. We have Gaurav Misra from HitRECord. Jeff Gomez from Starlight Runner, who advises Star Wars and Marvel properties, Disney. We have Jenni Powell from the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. This is really, really amazing, and I'm just so honored to be your host, Lucanus from ReelwUrld. It's a big deal. I hope you enjoy and learn something.
We have together luminaries from across filmmaking and technology that I personally studied for many years. And I want to do a quick intro for each one of them now, and then we can expand upon this idea as we draw lines, connect the dots between their work that they've done over the years and where we're going as a culture overall. And so first and foremost, I'm just going to go with to my left, we have Jeff Annison from Legion M. And Jeff has, what Legion M has accomplished with being the first fan-owned entertainment company is a huge deal. We'll expand upon that and what that really means for social filmmaking. Underneath Jeff, we have Jeff Gomez, the foremost mind in transmedia storytelling. Jeff is an icon to so many in his thought leadership across transmedia storytelling, how to collectively unite people to one goal and to utilize multiple platforms orchestrally to identify that goal. And his thinking has absolutely transformed what we've done at ReelwUrld for Justice for Hire, our first show. I'll talk more about that in a moment. Jenni Powell. Jenni is Emmy Award winner for the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. But I came across Jenni's work with Lonely Girl 15. And of course, like her involvement in these properties is really, really amazing. What she's done even since is a great example of grassroots, just making it happen, taking the thinking, the transmedia storytelling thinking that Jeff is very much at the forefront of, and actually just doing it by hand. And she's proven time and time again that you can do it by hand. And of course, we have Gaurav Misra from HitRECord. And I remember HitRECord is probably the first of everyone's energy on here. HitRECord's energy, the message I came across in like 2012 or so. And I remember when I first saw what HitRECord was doing. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, HitRECord, of course, Emmy winner in his own right. But when I saw that they were uniting all these people with the first open collaborative production company, it blew my mind. I was like, uh-oh, there's something happening here, and it actually is going to require a lot of contemplation to really not only grasp what they've already accomplished, but to see how we as a culture and society can learn from them and continue to grow with this really, really amazing collaborative experience that they've defined, literally defined. So with that said, we are all here to define social filmmaking. That is my hope. And I would also, there's this amazing question that I just want to throw out there now, what we can answer a little bit later. But this is from Mark Haride. And Mark he's general counsel of ReelwUrld, former SDCC, foundational to the establishment of equity crowdfunding as we know it today. And he has done so much for the industry, for so many. And he has this amazing question for all of us on here, which are what milestones need to be set before social filmmaking becomes mainstream? So we'll hold on, we'll put a pin in that. But with that said, Jeff Gomez, Jeff, please let everyone know just a little bit about your experience for those who are new to watching and understanding what transmedia storytelling is, so we can draw the lines here, connect the dots.
You know, this notion of transmedia storytelling comes out of a nerd-like desire to get lost in the fantasy worlds where I sought safety and security as a child. So really all I wanted to do was surround myself with my favorite stories and not have to leave. And that was the problem in the late 60s and early 70s when I was a young kid. It all was over all too soon. So what I got drawn to was big epic stories, like movies that had sequels, like the Godzilla movies or the Planet of the Apes movies and so forth, where you can revisit them and think about them and make theories up in your own head about how they really connected, because not too much attention was made to canon or continuity back then in Hollywood. Um, what really moved me was a Japanese media mix, because I was fortunate enough to live in Hawaii, of all places, in the mid 1970s, when Japanese pop culture, that big initial anime wave, and live action tokusatsu, the special effects TV shows for kids, just washed across Hawaii, and I got caught up in it. And there you can watch a TV series that had a sequel that was a feature film, a whole toy line, comic books, everything related to this same story world. And that was fascinating to me. That mixed with a little Marvel and DC universe, the way that the comics all had a kind of continuity and canon, and Lord of the Rings and the lore and depth of those worlds just jammed themselves into my head and manifested initially in fantasy role-playing games. So, Jan, really, my entry into this subject, the subject of a kind of communal narrative, emerges out of chasing the dragon of Dungeons and Dragons. The immediacy and the connection, the intimacy that you can have with your players, that they were moving through a world that I was making up even as they moved, and yet somehow knew and understood its vastness, its chronology, its future, and so forth. That was awesome. And at the same time, it was responding directly to the participation of these players. I wanted that to manifest itself gigantically in the world. It did not. Instead, I got video games, and I became a video game developer, and that wasn't quite satisfying because it was very mechanical, and then I just started, selling myself as a world developer, and Mattel and Disney and 20th Century Fox, the big studios, said, "Hey, he seems to know what he's doing. He's helping us to extend these intellectual properties across multiple platforms. He's a transmedia storyteller," and that's the fun I had. But we have still not quite yet reached that level of communal storytelling. It's funny, the person among us who has gotten the closest is Jenni Powell. Because those people really intrinsically involved themselves in the stories that she was telling. That was awesome. I'm still trying to scale that cosmically, Jenni, but that's my entry into this this space.
So that is an amazing segue to I was looking deeper, refreshing myself on Lonely Girl 15, on Jenni's Lonely Girl 15 and Jenni's Lizzie Bennet Diaries, and seeing how I believe that the metrics were, and this is a YouTube video I got this from, Jenni, so correct me if they're wrong, but you were doing 2 episodes per week. And for every episode, every release, you had real-time updates across all the social media accounts of all the characters. And this is not just one social media account. This is like Twitter and Facebook and Pinterest, and all this stuff is happening simultaneously. And the coordination, the effort that's required. If you could just paint the picture for us of what it looked like for you as a producer as someone looking at this story and saying, okay, we're a year out. How are we going to make this happen? How did you make it happen?
What were you thinking, Jenny? What were you thinking?
Well, I have to give credit where credit is due. Lonely Girl 15 was not my creation. It was created by a creator named Miles Beckett, who was inspired by the Blair Witch Project. And so I'm going to start with Lonely Girl. I'll then move to Lizzie Bennet Diaries, which I had more involvement in. But Lonely Girl 15 started as just an experiment to see if you could create a narrative out of this influencer community that had grown up. So the beginnings of Lonely Girl 15 were a 15-year-old girl named Bree who started sharing video blogs on YouTube. And it was trying to make it seem like this was a real person. And so that concept of trying to, put a real world into a narrative, because again, it'd been done with the Blair Witch Project. It's been done a couple other times, but I think the timing of the internet community being what it was and no one expecting something like that to happen really created this gelling of people that came together and was like, well, she's an interesting vlogger, but then there was the mystery of how she was sharing about her life. And this is actually when I found the project. It's interesting. I was really into vloggers, and I was toying with this idea myself. I was like, how come no one's used this as a narrative yet? And I was really interested in that. And somebody showed me Lonely Girl 15. And this was back when there was still like, oh no, she's real. And we think she's in a cult and we need to save her. And I was like, y'all are joking, right? Like, this is a story. And to this day, I don't know why I just kind of like tapped into that, but I was like, I need to find out who's doing this, because this is what I want to do. This kind of like, and it was very accessible because again, it was, the tools available to create it were readily available. Like, I didn't have to work with a huge studio, or you go through all the gatekeepers. And so I got really involved in the community around Lonely Girl 15, at which point it did finally come out that, yes, this is a narrative story. Because I was so known in the community, I actually got brought onto the team, which was a really interesting experience to like be a fan of something and then actually be brought into it because you have the right skill set. And like, nobody knows the story as well as a fan. So, if you find those capable fans, bring them in. And I've kind of always kept that energy with me moving forward from that project because, sorry, I just got cats and they're new and they're very like all over the place. So don't mind them. They're giving off a show of their own. So yes, and a lot of what I learned working on Lonely Girl 15, because Lonely Girl 15 ran videos 5 days a week and also had all the social media and was doing a lot of like writing on the fly to kind of keep up with the fan demands, because they'd be pointing things out and they're like, oh yeah, grab that, grab that, grab that. And not that I didn't love that, but I also saw the inefficiencies in production that are caused when you're so ingrained with trying to make sure it's perfect for every fan, right? So years later, when the Lizzie Bennet Diaries was brought to me by Hank Green, who is one of the Vlog brothers, if you guys are aware, very big in the influencer space, still big now. He came to me with just the concept of, we were just chatting and he said, has anyone tried to take a novel, a public domain novel, and adapt it to the YouTube vlogger format? And my mind almost exploded, and I immediately did a bunch of research. I was like, if no one's done this, we have to be the first. Like, this is an opportunity to create something like a genre that didn't exist. And so that's kind of the impetus of where Lizzie Bennet Diaries came from, which is an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice told vlog style. So as Jan mentioned, every character had social media accounts. How we did that is we took each and every character and designed their social media profile, because as we know, not every person uses every social media. So the goal was not use as much social media as possible. It was strategically use social media for what made sense for the characters. And though there was a lot of fan interaction, just as there was in Lonely Girl, there was still, because we were working off of an existing narrative, there was a little bit more structure. And we were a little bit more, like, we did try to integrate the fans as much as possible, but we didn't want them to drive the whole narrative, because that, again, I had found that difficult and challenging in Lonely Girl 15, whereas, you know, we kind of structured it a little bit more in Lonely Girl, or in Lizzie Bennet Diaries. So it was kind of taking all those lessons from, like, when you keep the sandbox completely open, and then kind of like trying to make sure the sandbox was as big as possible, while also being, because again, I'm very grassroots, like, you know, we shot it in my apartment. You know, I was craft services most of the time, you know, those kinds of ways of utilizing the technology to look and feel really natural with the tools that were available to us. So that's what we were thinking.
So Jenni, it was Gaurav. I have to say this: it was Jenni who suggested I reach out to you, and this was
right.
This was back in like late 2013, maybe early 2014, because I had met Jenni on a Geek and Sundry project. Through shout out to Sam Levine, who hooked me up with Sean Deloach, and who hooked me up with Jenni. And I had already known about HitRECord. I got excited for the Geek and Sundry project because I already knew about Lonely Girl 15, and I had studied it immensely, because I was like, man, this is what they're accomplishing. There's something here. And as an independent filmmaker, you know, my experience in Hollywood, coming from the NYU ecosystem, my experience in Hollywood was very much like, hey, I want to get this done my way. And the answer was like, well, we want to get it done with you, except our way. And that's for our first project, Justice for Hire. So I would constantly come up against the wall of getting studio interest, and then having a challenge when I wanted to be in it myself, when I wanted to direct it, when I wanted to have my friends in it, and all this other stuff, and involve our community, because we were already doing we already had our comic book out. And I would look at what Jenni was doing, and I would look at what HitRECord was doing, and I'd say to myself, like, there's something so important here, because they're not asking for permission, they're doing it. And later on, I want to get to how Jeff Annison and Legion M really just took that to a skyrocketed level. But Gaurav, I'm not sure if you have the connectivity on your phone right now to dive deep into this, but I'm very interested. Oh, okay, wonderful. I'm very interested in, you know, we've had, each and every one of you has given me so much guidance. And that guidance has turned into real, you know, it absolutely has. And so, and Gaurav, I know that what I saw happening with HitRECord, when I saw Joseph Gordon-Levitt on stage playing a piano, surrounded in a theater by people, who were part of the production, everybody was a part of it. I literally cried. I cried on the first episode of HitRECord on TV, because you know, similar to Jenni, she's like, Lonely Girl, she knows this is what she needs to do. I saw that episode. I'm like, that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. That position that he was in that moment of organizing all these people around one shared experience of filmmaking, to me was greatest feeling on the planet. You know, it's that and me being a father. You know, so I'm super interested in what led to your what led to HitRECord from your perspective.
Yeah, so you asked about my connectivity. I'm definitely spiritually connected to this conversation. I hope my mobile phone can keep up. and Jenni, I didn't realize that actually. So, you know, we should go grab a drink someday to commemorate the fact that you connected me to Jan and therefore back to you guys. But I'm really privileged to be on the same panel with all the J's here. I think, you know, I'm not sure I'm quite as credible. And also, by the way, I apologize for my background, but my office is also not nearly as impressive as their collective offices in the background. So I'm kind of glad I'm in a blurry car. But the HitRECord journey was kind of amazing. I was at MTV for a number of years back when it was cool, my opinion. Then it definitely is not now, I think. But because I think what you're doing is far cooler and sort of just you know, tapping into that the jet stream of what the world wants today. I think it tried to do back then, but we started our own production company, and I met Joe in probably 2012, and what he had created at HitRECord already was just magnificent and amazing, and exactly what you said, sort of spine tingling in its way of connecting thousands of people, like tens of thousands of people together, hundreds of thousands of people together, and pulling out their craft and allowing them to find a shared group of others to hone their craft with and create something of their craft. So on HitRECord already, there were tons of skits and music videos and micro worlds and animations and stories and episodic content that all sort of tied together. It was really amazing. And we thought to ourselves, how can we take what they're creating and put it out to the world at large? And honestly, if I can say this crassly, how can I get tens of millions of dollars from the old studio system to work its way through this new system so that all of these bedroom creators can get compensated for it and not just see the light at the end of the tunnel, but feel that light at the end of the tunnel and actually be inspired to continue creating and create more and go off on their own and try to branch off and sort of understand how their art form outside of platforms like these can also sort of get see the light of day. So that was the puzzle, and it worked. Like ultimately, the end game worked. Like, you know, in any given episode, you know, we paid out huge percentages of the budget went to thousands of creators every episode, and so. But in order to do that in a fair way, we enlisted the community to figure out how to compensate people in the best possible way, and you know, there was all these complicated fractional attribution things we did to figure it out, but everyone walked away feeling very equitable. And but in order to pull things like this off, honestly, you need quite a structure around you. So a lot of people in the community played a non-creation role. You had line producers effectively working their way through the community, and directors or notes givers. People would assemble a 15-second music score together, and someone was just giving notes, the sort of unsung hero in many ways behind the scenes. Many people were giving notes. So actually it was very layered. It became a fairly well-structured organization and organism to be able to deliver the amount of content it was doing and to filter through. And, you know, it was never about, I think, picking the best bits of content. It was about making everyone incrementally better so everyone could contribute to great pieces of content. And I think that's where some of the pitfalls of this stuff is like the curse of giving these tools to everybody. The blessings we know, right? We can democratize content, and content is created everywhere by everyone. You can find these multi-hyphenate talents everywhere in the world, and we all know the benefits of it. The curse is everyone thinks they can do it with little to no you know, thought or effort in some regard. And the truth is, it's still that 10,000 hour rule applies. Like the first several pieces of content you'll put out won't meet the mark. And then there's a community of people trying to get you to up-res it and make it better and better and better. And what up-res means, I don't literally mean by production value, but I mean just in terms of what that arc is or the narrative is or what you're putting out. So anyway, it was an unbelievable moment. I think what you're doing today, John, I think the way to, you know, make this mass is exactly what you're doing. Verticalize it in the right way. That world of heroes didn't quite exist in the way it did. It exists today in a way it didn't exist 10 years ago. So you're at a real moment in time where you have the technology, the need from both sides, but you verticalized it in an incredibly smart housing. Justice for hire, you know, for me, I think it's just brilliant. But But anyway, sorry, I don't think I answered the question, but I had fun rambling about why I did HitRECord or how we got into it.
Thank you for that. I mean, I think that there's a massive responsibility that we all have. I think the whole world is in film school right now. Like, we're all in film school. Most people don't know it. And we as filmmakers and storytelling experts have, from my perspective, a duty to help, to share the techniques that will help people be more intentional with their use of visual storytelling. And I think that each and every one of you on here has absolutely given a service to humanity and laid out a blueprint, so to speak, for people that if we can come together and clarify that, it'll be that much easier for people to leverage that blueprint and increase the quality of the stories we tell together, from an individual level, of a collective level. And I want to keep coming around to everybody, because I'm so massively excited to have you all on this call. But so I want to take this moment that Gaurav has really articulated, which is of bridging the studio system and into this new form of filmmaking, and having watched HitRECord, met Jenni, learned from Jenni, talked to Jeff Gomez, had him see into my soul with his massive empathy and make me feel nude. I was like, oh my God, he can see me, you know, and being like, wow, man, there's something really, really here, and I got to follow my heart and push forward on this thing to unite people with cinema, because this is I think really important. It's bigger than video games. It takes elements from video games, but there's social media and filmmaking are going to converge. And when I saw Jeff Annison and Paul, his partner Paul, Legion M, and I saw them saying what they were saying publicly with no fear, unapologetically, that the fans united are more powerful than any other like studio entity. Like, that to me blew my mind, because I was trying to figure out how to, I'm talking to Gaurav, I'm talking to Jeff, I'm like trying to figure this out. Like, hey, how do I take this idea, go to a studio? Studio's like, it could work, it could be fun, it could be a goofy, fun idea, you know? And then I go to the startup ecosystem. We were at UCLA Anderson, we went back to NYU, and I'm getting encouragement, but no real understanding. And while I'm hearing no's, I'm watching Jeff and Paul, Legion M, make it happen. And I told everybody about Jeff and Paul. I'm like, these guys are actually out there right now raising cash to build an ecosystem where they don't have to wait for a yes. They're just going to.
He really has, by the way. There's barely a sentence goes by where you guys aren't mentioned. Just FYI.
Oh, good. Wow. Thank you. No, well, it's great to hear that, and thank you, Jan, first of all, for including me in all this, and I really feel honored to be a part of this group, and I think the thing that we really share in common is just this belief in the community and the belief in fans, and I love hearing Jeff talk about community storytelling and Dungeons and Dragons, because like I feel like that is such a great, when you talk about like social storytelling, like I feel like that is such a great starting point and kind of a way to think of it. But for us, I can tell you, John, there was plenty of fear involved. I mean, this is still a startup. There's still plenty of fear involved, in what we're trying to do. But it's we just there was a revolutionary new change in securities law that went into effect that fundamentally changed the way that you could raise money for a startup. And Paul and I, because of a previous project, we just happened to be right in tune with that as it was happening, and it was like the stars lined up. And we saw this opportunity to create an entertainment company that is built from the ground up from day one to be owned by fans, and how that can fundamentally change everything about that, and how it can create competitive advantages when you're trying to release projects, and how you can harness the wisdom of the crowd to decide which projects you want to get involved with, and how you can leverage the crowd when to create viral buzz and grassroots, awareness when a project is coming out. And so, I feel like we were very fortunate to be in the right place and time at the moment that this idea became possible. And, and we jumped on it. And it's been an amazing experience so far. For us at Legion M, our real focus, first and foremost, is about how we can harness the power of our community to create strategic advantages in the entertainment industry, right? So we've got over 35,000 investors in the company today. So these are people that have, pulled out their credit card or invested at least $100 in the company. And they are the owners of the company. And, our long-term goal, you can see the M over my shoulder, the M with the bar over it, is the Roman numeral for 1 million, because our long-term goal is to unite 1 million fans. We baked that into the logo of the company. And so, we're 35,000 and growing rapidly. We just finished our fastest round ever, but you can see, like, we're still in the very, very early innings of what we think that this is. And we're just kind of scratching the surface. But I think that I am constantly blown away. It's kind of funny because when we launched the company, so many people told us, like, you want 1 million people on your cap table? You want like 1 million? Like, that's crazy. You're insane. It's the exact opposite of the way that business at least normally works, right? You want a couple small whale investors so that you can have an easy to manage board. And like, that's how you traditionally structure it. And the idea of having 1 million people kind of made a lot of people's minds break. And Paul and I were like, no, we think that there's going to be a lot more upside. And after having done this for 6 years, what we found is the power of the community is so, the upside so dwarfs any downside that comes from it. And I think, honestly, the biggest problem that we have, which is, I think, the biggest problem a lot of community-based organizations and efforts have, is that you don't have enough hands to accept all of the things that people are trying to give you, whether that's their time or their ideas or their the fact that they own a studio in Milwaukee and they'd love to, make it available for you and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, I love what you're doing. And I love, for me, I think this whole, to kind of get back to that question that you started it with, which is, what is social storytelling? What's the future of it? It's really, I feel like it's just being defined. Like, we live in this golden age where now suddenly we've got the power of a Hollywood studio in our pocket. Everybody has. And I think, really the question for you and for the folks that are really focused on that is, how can we make that evolve beyond TikTok? Right? I mean, if you think about it, TikTok is the social viewing, social storytelling platform of today. And it kind of is what it is. But I think the idea of trying to harness that and to harness the community so that it's more than just all the little individual pieces, but instead everybody working together to create something is really beautiful and magical.
Oh.
Go for it.
Me. I've kind of fantasized about being able to say some of this stuff in front of the Legion M guy. So here goes. Jeff, when we first went to Hollywood to talk about multi-platform storytelling, we included another platform that Hollywood went, huh? And we said, the audience is a platform. Now, this was 2000, 2001, 2002. We didn't have social media yet. And yet we said, these people are a part of the story. And you must respect them, and you must validate them and celebrate their participation. They were fanfic and fan films were starting already on the internet, and we said, so when you hire us to do Pirates of the Caribbean or Avatar or whatever in the aughts, we said, let us cultivate your fan base right along with building out the story world. And they said, no. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to have anything to do with them, actually? They are just the audience. You can only think of them as tickets or rating numbers. That's it. Stop. And it was very frustrating for us. In fact, we've raised this issue every single time with the studios, and then companies like yours popped up, and people like Kevin Smith and so forth, and Jenni started popping up and building extremely loyal, hyper loyal fan bases around their intellectual properties or their story worlds or their endeavors, and yet they still kind of pushed back and said no way. Most recently, Jan, the Subaraya Productions, the Ultraman people, they didn't know any better. So I said, oh, and we do this with the audience. It's called fan cultivation, and it's a part of transmedia storytelling. They said, okay. They didn't, what did they, they're in Japan. So they let us do this. And guys, all I really did was pull off my ears and stick it on either side of the rollout of the intellectual property and say, listen, I'm listening. Mm-hmm. Listen, people, I'm here. I'm a fan too. And so is my whole team. We love this thing, don't you? Join us and talk to us about this. Give us what we need to know to make this a blockbuster hit. This dusty old property that everyone's forgotten about, Ultraman. We want to bring it back and make it a really big deal, because there's deep meaning and there's a reason why it's an evergreen brand in Tokyo. Can it be here? And the answers were handed to us by old dude fans, but also brand new fans who were watching, what we were doing. And so we went from a subscriber base of 0 18 months ago to a subscriber base of 35,000 that is a part of the website subscription, and a subscriber base on the YouTube channel of a million Asian fans to now 2.3 million worldwide fans, international fans who've jumped on. And that's, and when you have that kind of momentum, as Jeff knows, suddenly Hollywood starts perking up. Suddenly everyone wants to be your partner, and licensees want to license your property. And that generates momentum. The one thing we won't do is leave our fans behind, and just start churning out widgets, Ultraman widgets. They have to come with us in order to manifest this. So this is an example, a tremendous one, because we have a gigantic deal with Netflix now. It's an example of how powerful leveraging fans, but caring about them deeply and involving them in the storytelling can result in super fast. It used to take years and years to create, a blockbuster brand. Now it can be done lightning fast because you have access directly to dialoguing with your audience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Guys, I want to connect some dots here, because something that Gaurav said to me in 2014 connected to something that Jeff Annison said. And back in 2014, Gaurav, you and I were having a conversation. I think I was looking at one of my Power Rangers toys at that time, like during our call. and you had mentioned that that if you don't guide the audience, what you'll get is a quilt in terms of the content creation. And it could be a beautiful quilt, but it will be patchwork. And Jeff, Jeff Annison, you were talking about TikTok and how TikTok very much right now, it is the place for what it is. It is what it is right now. This is people coming together. They're sharing certain stories. It's very focused. It's video first, etc. It's different than YouTube in terms of there is the constant. It is the constant feed, and that is much closer to the current rate of consumption. And so I think it's really interesting, and tying this to Jeff Gomez in terms of, I always tell people when we pitch ReelwUrld in meetings that Jeff Gomez was pitching this in '99, and that's because you've had this concept for so long of a platform that is for the audience to create with the IP, the stakeholders. And so I think
you said no, by the way.
Thank you for underlining that. So I'm just doing my best with the theme of our talk today. Star Wars was made by a rebel, and now it is produced by the Empire. You guys know this, if you're all of you are on my email list, but for 2 months, this ended 2 weeks ago, but for 2 months I drove Lyft to promote our crowdfunding campaign for ReelwUrld and our show Justice for Hire, first show produced in the community, which to Jeff's point, a relatively unknown IP. We have some comic book successes, but overnight 7.5 million views for our first episode, and really proving that we have something that the audience wants in terms of the desire to share a narrative universe with other people, etc. What I'm getting at by mentioning this is that, and I also had one of these, I had an executive from Paramount in my Lyft car during these rides, and we were talking about Star Trek, and Star Trek was made by a rebel and is now produced by an entity that is very much the antithesis of, when I look at Star Trek, the most potent Star Trek is Star Trek The Next Generation at seasons 1 through 4. That's because that was Gene Roddenberry at his height of being a guru, of recognizing his true purpose and saying, no, this will not go out in this way. Humanity in the future, this vision that is coming through me needs to be articulated in this way. If I watch a Star Trek episode now, if I just remove the Star Trek branding and I just listen to the dialogue and what they're talking about, it sounds like any show. It could be anything. It does not feel like Star Trek to me personally, and I'm a diehard fan. I will pull out another toy right now to show you how much I'm a diehard fan. This is Riker. Okay. so what I'm getting at here is that there's something happening with TikTok. There's something happening with everybody on this call, and that is being that we're right now defining it, and we'll continue defining after the call. But there is something on that Netflix doesn't have that TikTok has. And I've referred to it in the past in some of my writings as the positivity model. There is a stream from the heart space of the creator directly to the audience that is not there on Netflix, because the creative decisions that are made by committee block that heart space. So therefore you get a calculation rather than the heart space energy, which is really coming to rapid fire on TikTok. So I think one of the things that I am doing my best to learn from each one of you and consistently implement on a daily basis with ReelwUrld is how to balance out the heart space energy with the guidance that is our responsibility as with the whole world being in film school, the guidance that's our responsibility to impart with folks. And hence we built a social net. ReelwUrld is essentially a social network with guidance, and the infrastructure that, you know, Gaurav mentioned it, said it so beautifully. How do you take this old system and get you know, tens of millions of dollars from it and pump it into this new system to do amazing things with people? And I'm interested in everyone's thoughts on how that works, on how to let Tai Chi this energy. Me as a Tai Chi guy, to redirect the resources, the energy from the studio system. And I'm interested, especially Jeff Annison, how you're doing this with your ability to greenlight internally. You're like, hey, you know, we're good to go. We have our own community. And Jenni, I'm very interested from your perspective as well, is how you keep doing it without the studio support, because you are a repeat offender when it comes to creating consistent breakthrough transmedia content. You just keep doing it. Like, so I'm interested in, please guys respond.
Well, I can say from Legion M's perspective, we have a saying, which is, you don't make great art by committee. You make great art by finding great artists and then getting out of their way and providing them with the support. So from our perspective, our goal is really, you know, to do that. Like with our projects, it's not about a committee sort of decision. It's empowering the artist to connect with the audience in the way that they want to. And I think that the other thing that's really interesting about Legion M is because of the fact that we are owned by fans as opposed to Wall Street, you know, hedge funds and that sort of thing, like it really fundamentally changes our calculus, because I feel very confident that if I go out to our community of investors and give them the option between, we've got this one option that's going to generate 4% more profit over the next quarter, and we've got this other option which is going to make a little bit less money but is really, really cool, that, you know, the decision is a no-brainer. And it's just, you know, the Wall Street is always going to have to go by the numbers, not because they're evil, but that's their fiduciary responsibility, right? That's where our 401ks are. And we're counting, you know, those people are charged with managing our money, and that's what they do. They manage it to get the highest possible financial return, and that's what matters. And I think that when you have a company that's owned by fans, or a story that's owned by fans, or, you know, it really can fundamentally change the calculus.
Jenni, your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So, I mean, on my level, as everything everybody's saying, I'm connecting with it. So, I mean, not surprising. We are like-minded in this room, but, you know, some things I heard was like coming at it from the heart, listening, and I loved, Jeff, what you were saying about, it's not about creating by committee. It's not about, because like I was saying, that was actually, I learned that very early on, that trying to listen to every single person and cater to everyone is not what fans are looking for. They just want to know that you're listening, and then it's your job as kind of the creative vision to take what they say and craft it in a way that serves the story as a whole. Because if you are going to go about it by, again, trying to integrate every single voice, I mean, in building a community, the first thing they say is, you know, avoid the trolls, don't listen to like if you try to cater to every single comment, you will burn out. And I think it's very important as creators, and I try to teach this now, because my next step in my creative journey is I'm now teaching. So I love what you said, Jan, about we are all in film school. I do really believe that the future of social storytelling is to teach the creators that are coming up, that are, you know, that have grown up with these tools, that have them at their disposal, and to help guide them in these skills, listening, building community, I mean, I teach whole courses just on community building at the film school level. And, you know, at first students are like, why are we learning this? And I was like, you say that now, but trust me. And in fact, my own background, like I don't have a film school degree. I learned it by doing, and my degree is in psychology, which, hey, producers, think about it. You might want to try taking some psychology courses. It serves you very well out in the real world. So yeah, everything you're kind of touching on is and you know, we also teach transmedia. I teach at the New York Film School. We have multiple locations. I'm in LA. We have a New York campus. We're kind of like all over the place. But in my transmedia classes, we talk about that some of the tools that are available to us now to have these platforms to tell multiple stories on, they may be new, but the fundamental core of transmedia story, which is world building, that's been ingrained in us as human beings for, like, you can track it back thousands of years. We as humans want to interact. We want to build worlds. We want to involve in them together. I always talk about mythology, Greek and Roman mythology. That was transmedia. You had, you know, all the different gods with their different stories. Sometimes they had their individual goals, but oftentimes they'd have to pair up. And you know, Jeff Gomez talks about the collective journey now versus the hero's journey. I love that concept. And again, it's not that they're new, it's just that we're re-exploring them now with new technologies that increase our ability to tell stories in different ways. But again, the core of how we like to tell stories has been there forever.
Jen, that thing you say about getting better just really, really hits me. I feel like, you know, as in that you're introducing layers of education on folks and forcing the community to hold each other accountable to quality and stuff. I think there's a reality check. A lot of the old world kind of norms, a lot of them we're trying to shake off, as you said, in this new world. And both Jeffs talked about this in the way they're creating stuff and the way they pitch even. But a lot of the old world norms you can't shake off. You go to 50 auditions, you're still only getting through one of them. Like, you put up 50 pieces of content, only one of them is getting traction. It doesn't mean you don't create the other 49 because one flopped, or you've got to keep that going and you've got to keep getting better. And there's this reality check you sort of almost have to have on yourself is the stuff I'm putting out to the world sublime or shit? I'm sorry. And you have to sort of, and a lot of the time I look at things that I put out and I'm just like, actually, that just wasn't even very good, reflecting back on it. Just because I did. That's not the reason. That's not the reason for me to do. And so you sort of take your time and you tinker again. You go back to the drawing board, and instead of being instinctive and fast about putting something out, you're much more contemplative and slow about putting something out, but the quality goes up, and then someone in the community likes it, or a super fan, as Jeff Gomez was talking about, this idea of these super fans, invests more time in it, and you realize there's something there, and you go back and you tinker and toil more, and you spend even longer. And look, those cycles are compressed, absolutely, to what Jeff Annison was saying, but there are still cycles and there are still investment times. And so anyway, so I love that idea, Jenny, of just making this collective whole better and better and better, and the output getting better, and the community, and making the community in a kind way enforce that.
Mm-hmm.
Gaurav, I have please, Jeff, go ahead.
Just to play on what Gaurav and Jenny were talking about, the what's happened over the past 10 or 15 years is that a huge number of people who had no voice at all in terms of the media, in terms of being able to communicate to more than a few people at any given time, they now all have a voice. Mm-hmm. And so we're at a precarious moment, a moment where something like this notion of collective or communal filmmaking is becoming more and more vital. not just to amuse ourselves, but to help ourselves out of these complex, major challenges that we're facing. It used to be that storytelling was very binary, especially as Hollywood kind of simplified everything so that the story could fit in a short period of time, right? Good versus evil, protagonist, antagonist, bang, bang, bang. Any other character was either your ally helping you along the way or helping the bad guy along the way, but it was always like this. And now, what we're doing is we're taking those simplistic lessons and we're asserting them on each other. And so we're getting a chaos, this kind of ocean of nuttiness that's happening all around the world. When really there are models, I believe, of storytelling where we need to respect various perspectives. If we can pause and let someone speak, and be honest, not necessarily trumpet some party line, but express themselves and place themselves within the mind and heart of a character so that we can see that character's perspective. That's the beauty of this notion of real world, of this notion of collective filmmaking, because that is not a patchwork quilt. That is a rich story world where I get to kind of embody all these different characters to see how they're looking at this world. When we get to do that again and again and again, it will start to train us to understand that there is no right or wrong. There are different perspectives on these things, and that way we can understand. It will help us to reconcile. It stops this and starts making us look at things systemically. And there are flaws in our system. If we don't fix those flaws, we're doomed, right? So it's a solution, this notion of filmmaking from all of these different perspectives, because it teaches us that if we reconcile, we can fix the system.
So Jeff, that connects to, thank you for saying that, because that connects so beautifully to what I was going to ask Gaurav. And because Jeff, you and I, we were on a call earlier this week, and you reminded me of the importance of narratives with systems of wisdom embedded in them. And I think systems of wisdom, that's a subject for another call. But I think systems of wisdom and collectively being able to see the same wisdom together because it serves the greater good is something that we as a society absolutely need to put energy into, more effort into. And I think that what we're doing on this call and the systems that we're all building is actually an opportunity for that. That opportunity connects to the idea of HitRECord and Joe at HitRECord saying, "I am your director." And I thought that was so interesting, so powerful, to have a platform of all these people who are essentially their own directors, and Joe being what I would, we can call it an executive director, we can call it a conductor, but he was definitely in a position and to help guide the community on the creative path. And so Gaurav, I'm really interested because at times we've framed ReelwUrld as a director in your pocket, because the concept is to be able to give the guidance down to performance and camera direction. There's all these nuances that filmmaking, as we all know, is so many different crafts coming together to create the art. And when someone who doesn't, I just had to do a mic drop on Gary Vee a few days ago because he's talking about how NFTs can, like you write your script and put it on NFT, and then people can invest in that NFT, and then your movie gets made, and made has quotations around it because who knows how to make a movie? Jenni knows how to make a movie. Jenni's over there making stuff from scratch and making transmedia storytelling content with her hands. So there's a reality to what Jenni does versus let's say a common film executive who may not necessarily know how to make a movie at all, like physically produce a film. And so Gaurav, I'm really interested in your thoughts on how having the directorial component embedded into your system in the form of a human being, a leader that is clearly defined. How did that influence HitRECord, and does it still continue to influence HitRECord moving forward as you've evolved?
Yeah. By the way, first of all, I also realized I need to take some of my own medicine and be a better content creator, because look at my background versus their backgrounds. I told you I should have stayed in the car. I've got this strange stick figure lamp that I'm now hating all of a sudden after seeing the background. So I will work on it. I will be a better version of myself the next time. I'm taking notes. I took notes. All right. So HitRECord, everyone thinks, well, not everyone thinks, in many ways, you could easily from the surface look at it and think it thrived or survived or succeeded in whatever world and way it succeeded because of his celebrity and the fact that he was in the middle of it. It wasn't that at all. And John is pulling on the real thread as to why it worked, which is it was somebody willing to take control as a director, and it happened to be him, and people wanted to, respect him and hear his notes, and it sort of made sense. And so that the second part of that is we all need humility to be able to take notes. And so these systems, like all of us on this call, hate our ass being handed to us by a network executive, but it's happened a million times. And we often roll our eyes and say we know better, but we don't. Or we may, or we do, and we got to figure out that middle ground. And so creators that I've seen that work best, I think, are able to take notes with a lot of humility. So then going back to Joe's point around the director, there are actually tens of directors in the system. And they work because over the course of years, this super fandom notion that Jeff referenced again, they worked their way up through the ranks and had done their homework, and their nose was to the grindstone. And they were sort of, anointed by, yes, the executives, and yes, by Joe and the employees at HitRECord, but also by the community saying this person was actually excellent on this musical score. And then 20 of those excellence on musical scores later, this person became the micro director of musical scores. So there's so much going on that one person can't do it all. But the idea that one person said, this is how a community works, is that there is a director, and you will be getting notes from folks, and you will be getting direction from folks. So having one person sort of lead it that way enabled the sort of, I think, the entire structure and pyramid to work, or the flat hierarchy to work. And it's not like anyone's throwing their weight around or throwing what salary band they're in a network. That's not what it is at all. Everyone has their perfect function in a perfectly functioning, or civilization, I guess. And so it works, I think, and for justice for hire as well, that is something that needs to be solved for, and it will only be solved for over time from when the community says what's working and what isn't working, is how you get the best pieces of quality content, who is the person selecting what gets put and where, and how does everyone sort of row together to make the best stuff come up.
There's so many amazing ideas that are shared here. And I constantly think, Jenni, something back to what you were saying in terms of the youth and giving, recognizing that there are people who are native to social. And, I often say this about my son, that one day people will say, what do you mean there's a movie I can't be in? And that we need to be able to help make that real with our thinking here, thinking that's been pioneered by each and every one of you here. And I would love to open the floor to questions to each other, because normally I have a bunch of people on these Zoom calls asking questions, but today I thought it was so powerful to have you guys on here together, because again, you really like what I am not kidding. I've dreamt about this moment. I thought it was going to be in person, but I've dreamt about this moment of having specifically each one of you together at the same time. So it is a huge moment personally for me. I'm so grateful. And I would love if you guys have any particular thoughts, ideas, or questions for each other to be able to express that here and potentially to serve you, all of us and the greater good.
I have a question for Jeff A. Since we have our double Jeffs here. So I'm interested because I'm part of the Legion M group.
Oh,
Part of that 1 million, hopefully.
fantastic.
And I'm in there you have a very thriving Facebook community that, share ideas with each other. And you just recently put out a communication about a project that actually isn't going to be made.
Mhm.
And so what was your thought process on how transparent you were going to be about that? Because you were very forthcoming and transparent.
Yeah, thank you. It's for us, we think that part of what we provide for our shareholders is the ability to come along for the ride in a startup. And you guys, everyone on this call, I think knows what that's like, whether your startup is a tech company or a show that you're producing, which is effectively a startup or a movie. And so, it's just something that we think is the right thing to do, just from like a moral standpoint. If you are thinking about investing in us, we want you to have all the facts. And I think that that's important. But I also think that it's really fascinating because putting out a message like that, and you guys probably don't know, we had a project, a huge project that we sold to a major streamer. And this was one of the, really pivotal announcements that we made probably about a year ago. And we recently found out a couple of weeks ago that the streamer, which is, we can't announce who it is because it's all covered by NDA, but it's one of the big ones. It's the name that everybody knows. They had gone through a strategic alignment and they had to cut the project from their slate. And so, that was a kind of a gut punch, for us. And, we'd worked on it it took us 8 months to negotiate the contract. And it was a huge, huge point. And so, there's always trepidation about sharing that news. But I got to tell you, every time we've done a post like that, where we share the hard news and the real news, the feedback that we get from the community is so powerful and it's so understanding. And the ratio of people saying like, that's fine, we'll get them next time, versus the people that are saying you guys screwed up, or hey, this is a problem, it's just, you can't even measure it because everybody is so positive. And I think at the end of the day, society is so conditioned to being sold to that they really respond to honesty and transparency. And I think as an entrepreneur, like that's just advice that I would give everyone. The more straight you can be with people, the more powerful it is. And, I see that with, watching some of Joe's updates to people on HitRECord, right? It's that authenticity and this fact that we are all a community and we're all trying to do this. And, life has ups and downs and, people can take it. So.
John, I don't know whether I'm even supposed to put my hand up, or I don't know whether to outage that moment, but I still do. Jeff Gomez, I've got to ask you, I think you're probably one of the most progressive thinkers I've ever come across. And I've obviously known of you and about you through John a lot before. You were talking earlier about pitching things in the year 2001, 2002, when people just looking at you going, what are you even talking about? History hasn't generally been kind to people ahead of their time, both in the postscript narrative and in the in-moment narrative. How in movements like this do we prevent, or not prevent, how do we make sure that we hit things at the right time, or we stick with it at the right, that it is an age-old thing of like, oh, this thing didn't get traction, but 10 years later it does. And so what is that dance you need to do with what, with all of these movements and conversations we've had today?
It's a great question, Gaurav, and one of the things that I did that annoyed my representation. I've had a lot of agents and lawyers, and they didn't like this. I would talk about it nonstop. I would teach it. I would enter into organizations like the Producers Guild of America and say, listen, if you're a producer, why would you want to make one of something and then just lose control of it and wave goodbye to it when you can, when what's in there is a world rich enough to play across multiple media platforms and involve fans. And somebody finally thought that was at least a good enough idea to attribute a credit to it, transmedia producer, and and allow for me to make a living at it while still proselytizing. But Gaurav, there's another thing that we have to keep in mind. A lot of us, and we've talked about this, Jen, come out of a mentality of scarcity. So you're taught that you're only going to go so far, and you'd only make so much money, and don't even think about talking to those people or those people or those people, because they're not going to listen to you. They're not going to give you money, and so forth. Who are you? You're Puerto Rican. You're from the projects. Whatever excuse. You look funny. All that stuff that has to be surmounted. So it took, for me, a shift in mentality that took years and years and years in order to get over, and then apply myself. So transmedia storytelling was great, and I did okay with it. Not so bad, but I didn't become, Steven Spielberg. It wasn't, it wasn't that great. So, and some of that has to do with the prison bars that we put in front of ourselves. So now there is a new thing. There's Web3. So there are these tool sets that allow you to essentially take and keep credit in something that you can contribute to an ocean of somethings, and still somehow have access to this little piece of idea or story or piece of filmmaking that you contributed to this greater thing. That's a tool. That's awesome. That's interesting. Okay. So what I'm trying to do is apply everything that I learned about the struggle and about lifting those bars, and instead of being so far ahead that I can't even communicate with these people, I'm there, and here's the tool set, and together something amazing can happen. And I can accelerate these ideas and get them done today instead of, seeming like a nutball.
Very helpful.
There's my hand.
Yeah.
All right. So I was curious for Jenni. I had not heard of the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, but it sounds like a fascinating project. I'm also a huge John and Hank Green fan, and I was just curious to hear how that ended up develop, and also what else are you working on? Like what else do you have in the pipeline for these sort of grassroots projects?
Sure. Well, I actually met John and Hank Green in the days of Lonely Girl 15. A lot of big vloggers credit Lonely Girl 15 with, oddly enough, getting them to be vloggers, even though she is a whole thing. But anyway, John and Hank were a part of that community. And so we had known each other a really long time. And like I had mentioned, Hank and I talked about partnering on a scripted project for a really long time, because again, Hank is more known for, he's big on TikTok now. Whatever the new thing is, he's going to find a way to be a part of it. But he didn't have as much experience with scripted content. And so I also worked with him on VidCon. I was there. I booked all the talent and did that stuff for many years. And we were just having a conversation online one day, and he threw out this idea of, he's like, I was thinking about it the other day, and I was like, I don't think anyone's taken a public domain novel and adapted it to specifically the like vlog style. And so I'd already worked on Lonely Girl 15. I knew that format. There was a second reason he specifically asked me, and that's because originally, because my first question was, has anyone done this before? No one had. And I go, oh my God, what book do you want to do? And he went, The Diary of Anne Frank. And I went,
oh no,
absolutely not. And he's like, what are you talking about? Because he knows I'm very close to Anne Frank and her story.
Oh.
And I think he thought I was just going to be like, yeah, that's amazing. And I went, no, there are multiple reasons that wouldn't work. And it took 8 months of development, one, to like talk him down from wanting to do that, because he was just like, no, it's huge. And I was like, no, we shouldn't start with that, because it's not public domain and there's a lot of reasons. And so finally he's like, oh, you know what? You're right. What are we going to do instead? And it was Hank's wife that suggested Pride and Prejudice. And that kind of like lit the spark. Like once we had the book, we were like, yes, like we read it. It had a time frame that could work. It could be modernized in several different really interesting ways, because that was another thing with Anne Frank. I was like, how do you modernize that story? Like, how do we bring that and have it have the impact? And then we brought in Bernie Sue, who is the head writer, and then the other executive producer. And once we kind of had that, it was like off to the races. We were casting, it was like all kind of fell into place. And it was just one of those amazing things where we knew we hit on something like new and different. We were fairly confident that people would hit on it right away, but we had thoughts of like, well, do we try to roll it out like Lonely Girl? Like, do we try to give that essence of it's real? And we actually made the decision not to do that. But we did not say, we put out the title and Hank did a vlog on it, but we never specifically said it was Pride and Prejudice. It was the fans that discovered it. And then it was the fans who blew it up, because they're like, oh my God, look what they did. It ended up just being a huge hit. And it was a 1-year project. We knew we were going to do the entirety of the book and then stop. There was no like, let's try to keep this going forever. So there were a lot of things about it that just ended up being like timing. We hit a really good audience. It was a long enough amount of time that we could really build a community. And it was a really just beautiful story that once it was finished, we could kind of be like, here it is. And we get fans all the time telling us, oh, I rewatched the whole thing. It's 100 episodes. I was like, that's a investment, but
a commitment.
Yeah. But I've done several of Lizzie Bennet Diaries. The first is always going to be the biggest, but then we also went on to adapt Emma into a series called Emma Approved that kind of took what we did with Lizzie Bennet Diaries and grew it out even more. That one also won an Emmy, so I'm a double winner. And then I didn't want to get pigeonholed into like, I don't just do adaptations, but then a producer approached me and said, I want to do Peter Pan, which was literally like the only project I couldn't resist. So we did The New Adventures of Peter and Wendy, which was in the same kind of style, but we took the story and we actually aged the characters up. So Peter Pan in our version is in his late 20s. And so it's more about like him reaching a point where is he going to mature in life or not? And we played with a lot of magical realism in that series. Like Neverland was Neverland, Ohio. So it was supposed to be this boring town, but it still had fairies and mermaids. So that was really great. And my latest project, I was an executive producer and co-creator on a project called Gods and Secrets, which was a dark superhero noir that was on Netflix. I did that project with Adi Shankar, who, you know, if anyone's familiar with his background, he also likes to play in he calls it bootlegging, where he takes properties he has no ownership of and makes content anyway. And so this was actually not that, it was actually original content, because I was like, hey, you know, we kind of need to do something that's original so that we're not constantly like breaking these rules. And then now I think I mentioned I am chair of the producing department at the New York Film Academy. And in my work there, we're trying to integrate a lot more. Well, I've been there 7 years, and we've grown out, like, most of our departments include transmedia in their programming now. And we're trying to build that out even more. I'm currently working on a master's degree in, it's a mouthful, but it's entrepreneurial producing and innovation. So that's we just got WASC approval for it, which is a big deal. So that's going to be my life for probably the next year, is building out that program. And I might need to talk to all of you. So that's where I'm at.
Fantastic.
Guys, I want to layer one more idea on. Jenni, I know that you have a hard stop coming soon.
Yeah.
And before that hard stop, you tell Adi Shankar that I still think about him not tasting my kombucha when I went over to his house. Brought him some kombucha. So you tell him that Jam remembers that.
I will. He missed out.
He missed out. I brew kombucha at home. It's good. It's good life. So painting the picture here between Jeff Gomez with the foundational transmedia storytelling, the orchestral narratives, weaving us all together into a collective journey, to HitRECord, actually creating a platform where it is focused with our director and other directors underneath the director, so that we can all come together and create in a collaborative production. Seeing how Jenni took these from her own perspective, this way of orchestrally utilizing media, and actually did it by hand, and as an inspiration to other producers that can do the same, including myself, hence what we're doing with ReelwUrld. And seeing Jeff Annison and Paul step up with Legion M and say, we are building a studio, that to me is really taking us to a point in history where we are now looking at an entirely new, of course, Web3, et cetera, coming on top of that. But where we are really in a point where we can say that as a collective, we can do it on our own. We don't need the old guard to say yes to us to make the thing happen. We just do it. And I love that. I think it's so important. And I want to layer something on top of that. A few ideas. One, of course, the processes, the storytelling, et cetera, the process of being a director, I often say is the director, the skill sets you learn as a director serve any organization, anywhere. And it is in any form of business, I always notice the holes. As a matter of fact, ReelwUrld, before it was even called ReelwUrld, when I was sitting at Universal Music Group for 22 months, incubating this idea, you know, what my work across video games and across film and TV and in comic books, etc., all of these different areas of industry all had similar problems that they call by different names. And I always thought how the director has the skill set of working with all these different department heads to be able to focus energy toward a single goal. And that's part of why we started calling ReelwUrld a director in your pocket, because of the concept here is to direct toward the goal of telling a single story world narrative that encompasses so many other smaller pieces that are actually very, very significant. And that leads us to that idea of the cinematic universe. The cinematic universe, what Marvel has established in such a beautiful way, I'd say at the very least up to the point of Endgame. I think Endgame and what was achieved with Endgame is something that it goes so far beyond entertainment. What it showed us, from my perspective, is that we could all see ourselves together on screen. In this one focused moment, we are all together. We are all represented from all across the world, from all dimensions. We're all coming together to combat the challenge that is in front of us to solve the problem. And that to me, like, I loved watching. I was in the theater with tears on my face too. I don't cry at everything. I mean, it seems like I cry at everything. Watching HitRECord crying, watching Endgame crying. These are real important moments. And so, like, I'm sitting in there with tears down my face when Captain America gets that Thor's hammer, you know, and I'm freaking out. And I love watching these videos, the viral videos of people freaking out in the theater. And I think the most important thing that I've come across when it comes to a film since Endgame has been RRR. And that's on Netflix right now. You can watch it. A huge international release from India. And the reason I'm pointing out RRR, if you look at what's happening with RRR and you look at the viral videos of what's happening to people in the theaters, where they're throwing ticker tape parades in the theater during the movie, dancing, etc. There's something happening there with the audience that it's not just, there's a lot here to unpack, because it is representative, indicative of where other cultures are and their growth of the cinematic experience versus where we are in America with things like pitch meeting an honest trailer, where we're so bored of the same patterns that our entertainment is coming from ripping apart the patterns and showcasing that these challenge, oh yeah, look what he's going to do next. And I think the solution to that very much lay in Jeff Gomez's teachings of how we are now revisiting, as Jenni put it, all these amazing models that have been forgotten, and that we can reinvigorate these models with systems similar to what HitRECord built, with organizations similar to what Legion M has built, and we can come together and really, really actually change reality by utilizing our entertainment in intentional ways, and to utilize story for the tool that it's really meant to be. Like all the stories that historically have been told around the campfires, as Jeff has put it, these aren't for entertainment. These are for lessons. This is for growth. This is for us to come together as a stronger community. Marvel showed us that with Endgame, even though the films afterward, you know, may not be as awesome. But I'm sure they're leading to something. Jeff, you probably know best. But I had to layer all those on to make one delicious pancake platter for this closing. And I'm just so grateful to each and every one of you for the personal inspiration and personal support that you've given me as an entrepreneur and as an artist, as a filmmaker, to help me see. You help so many of us see. And I'm massively, massively grateful, eternally grateful, each and every one of you guys, for that. And I'm hoping that by doing this panel with you guys, that other people, if they didn't know about what you were doing, that they're going to go and check you guys out. Please go. I'll put it all in the description. Check each and everybody on here out, because what they're doing is just so important to the future of cinema, to the future of film and TV, because we are all in film school. And I love you guys, and thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. So that's the sign off. And can we also get a thumbs up for the social post for everybody? Awesome, guys. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to press stop on this record.